thank you, and thank you all for coming. My name is Treva and I manage the habitat program for the Nooksack tribe. So for the Nooksack tribe, salmon recovery begins with South Fork Nooksack early Chinook. There's some nuance to quantifying recovery goals, but a simple expression would be that if the habitat could produce 9,900 returning adults, that would constitute recovery. Here in black are the recent escapement estimates for the population, and if you're having a hard time seeing that, don't worry, they're just really small. So the estimates are 84, 122, and 11 natural origin spawners for those years. As a result of these low abundances, we really focus our recovery actions on those actions that will provide a near-term boost in abundance and productivity. So there are a number of reasons why the freshwater habitat productivity is so low, but among those are high temperatures. These red bars show the 7-day average of the daily maximum temperature for those same years and relative to water quality standards and lethal thresholds. And you can see that all 3 years they exceeded water quality standards and approached lethal as they do every year. This is a map of the South Fork Nooksack River watershed from the headwaters down to the mouth at the upper left. The South Fork flows into the lower Nooksack, which flows into Bellingham Bay. The segments in red are those segments that are 303 delisted for temperatures. In response to the 303 delistings, the Washington Department of Ecology and EPA initiated a temperature TMDL in 2011. Lummi Nation and the Nooksack tribe, as tribes in the watershed, were part of the planning process, and we provided comments early on that we were concerned that the TMDL would not directly address climate change. At the same time, the EPA Office of Research and Development was looking for to develop a pilot project for integrating climate change into temperature TMDLs, and they decided to select the South Fork, for which we were grateful. The two components of the pilot project was first a quantitative assessment, which compared temperatures under current and future climate scenarios. And then there was a qualitative assessment of impacts of climate change to salmoniid populations in the South Fork and an evaluation of actions to address those impacts. The roadmap for the qualitative assessment, which is the subject of this talk, is a paper by Tim Beachy and others from 2012 entitled Restoring Salmon Habitat for a Changing Climate. So the steps of the qualitative assessment were first to evaluate climate impacts to the South Fork, evaluate impacts to the salmoniid populations in the watershed, evaluate actions for the ability to address climate impacts, and develop recommendations for adaptation. So beginning with the first step, we decided early on to characterize legacy impacts, at least qualitatively, because we felt it important to provide a context for climate impacts. We also, Tim and his co-authors had focused their evaluation on increases in temperature, decreases in low flow, and increases in peak flows, but we wanted to add sediment as an impact to consider. So low flow stream, critical condition stream temperatures were estimated for with Qual2KW model, mechanistic temperature model, and the annual future annual temperature regime was estimated using a Mosenni approach. Obviously, USGS stream gauge data to characterize recent historic and current flow regime, and UW Climate Impacts Group VIC model outputs, as well as some SVM modeling that's been done in our watershed. We do have a sediment load, and we're working with USGS on developing estimates, or we hope to work with USGS on developing estimates of future sediment load, but at this point the characterization of future sediment regime is qualitative. So what are the projected impacts? So this is the Qual2K model output for current conditions, 7-day average of the daily max, critical low flow conditions is just under 21 degrees. And with climate change, depending on the climate model used, we might expect to see increases in critical condition 7 DADM of anywhere from 3.5 to 6 degrees centigrade. Just to provide a little perspective, 2015 fell right around in that 2080 low model. This is the annual temperature regime showing predicted mean monthly temperatures for a site on the lower South Fork under the medium impact scenario. The solid is based on the temperature record, and then there are projections for the future to 2020 shown in blue, the 2040s yellow, green, and the 2080s in red. So you can see that the increase is greatest in those summer months, but even in winter you're seeing we might expect increases of on the order of 1 to 2 degrees. These are estimates of changes in median seasonal stream flow based on DHSVM modeling of the broader Nooksack watershed. Again, finer scale DHSVM modeling is underway, but those weren't available for this. And so by 2075, we might expect to see summer low flows, median summer low flows to decrease on the order of 26 to 50%, and winter flows, median seasonal flows projected to increase 39 to 88%. What this doesn't really capture is those extreme events that really are the most impactful to salmon. And then finally, sediment loads are likely to increase under climate change due to loss of snowpack, increased intensity of precipitation events, increased mass wasting, bank erosion, and such. This is a figure that was put together for the Skagit River. It just shows how estimates of future hydrology is being coupled with sediment models to evaluate potential changes in sediment load. And I'll point you to this scale. This again is for the Skagit, but up to threefold increase for individual. I'm not sure if those are monthly estimates or what, but and we're working with again USGS to apply something similar to the Nooksack, but we expect to see some of the same patterns. So moving on to evaluating species impacts. We did focus our evaluation on our listed populations, our early Chinook and steelhead. We have summer steelhead as well as winter steelhead, and also bull trout. To inform our evaluation, we overlaid life stage periodicity by species with the periodicity of climate impacts. This is the life stage periodicity for our South Fork Nooksack early Chinook. So down the left are the life stages, and across the top are the months of the year. Overlaying the timing of increased winter peak flows, we would expect impacts to incubation, rearing, and outmigration. Loss of spring snowmelt that reduces discharge would affect river entry, migration holding, rearing, and outmigration. Increased temperatures during summer would affect most life stages, and then increased temperatures combined with decreased summer low flows would affect river entry, spawning, migration holding, and rearing. So we also overlaid the yearly temperature regime with species and life stage specific temperature thresholds, and we can use this to evaluate not just the magnitude of exceedance, but also the duration as well. We also did some analysis to understand the spatial distribution of impacts relative to species distribution. The dots are the Qual2K model output for the 2040 medium scenario critical low flow conditions, and you can see temperatures ranging from 23 to 24 in the upper watershed down to 26 to 27 at the mouth, and that's of course exceeding lethal thresholds. So highlighting some of the potential impacts for early Chinook, we might expect the following. Increased temperatures may delay river entry or cause a shift to bimodal entry. For migration and holding, we expect to see critical condition temperatures exceeding lethal thresholds. That would increase pre-spawn mortality, either directly or indirectly through increased incidence of pathogens like columnaris. Also, low flows would reduce access to upriver habitats and to tributaries which can provide the sort of cold water refugia from high temperatures in the lower main stem. For spawning, low flows and increased temperatures could result in shifts in timing and distribution of spawning. For incubation, increased temperatures could result in earlier emergence, thank you, while increased peak flows and or fine sediments would reduce the survival to emergence. For rearing, increased temperatures would affect growth rate. It could be positively if there's sufficient food, but if there's not sufficient food, it would lead to reduced growth rates. Increased fines could reduce feeding efficiency or reduce benthic invertebrate production. Reduced flows in summer would reduce the amount of space, reduce the habitat capacity for rearing. And then increased peak flows during overwinter rearing period would increase flushing downstream. And then finally, for outmigration, temperature increases could lead to earlier or impaired smoltification, and then reduced spring discharges could slow out migration, which may increase predation. So moving on to evaluating restoration actions. Again, we applied the approach laid out in the Beachy et al. 2012 paper. But we did adapt it to the kinds of actions we implement in the South Fork, and we also added consideration of sediment. So working through each category of action then. Actions to restore longitudinal connectivity, restore fish passage, would increase salmon resilience to climate change impacts. Actions to reconnect floodplains would address temperature increases, base flow decreases, peak flow increases, and sediment increases, and also increase salmon resilience. Similarly, for stream flow regimes, depending on the action taken, reducing water withdrawals or restoring wetlands could address the temperature and base flows, while improving road drainage would address the peak flow and sediment. There are other actions to address erosion and sediment delivery, which I won't go into now. Riparian restoration ameliorates temperature increase, and in-stream rehabilitation can ameliorate a temperature increase, but that effect is context dependent. So then we then prioritized actions based on the ability to address climate impacts, the left part of the table, and as well as the potential to implement a particular kind of action. In the South Fork, or in the analysis unit, we broke the South Fork itself into 5 reaches, and then we broke the watershed. We do implement different kinds of actions at the watershed scale. We broke the watershed into sub-watersheds. So this just shows the table for the South Fork. In red are the high priority actions. Yellow is actually moderate, not green, and then green is low. So just highlighting the high priority actions. Floodplain reconnection is a big one. Removing or setting back hydromods in the lower, in reach 1 where they occur. We also have a problem with channel incision due to the removal of wood from the system and clearing of the riparian forests. So log jams to grade the channel and reconnect floodplains that way. So that's a priority in reaches 1 and 3, where the unconfined reaches of the South Fork. Restoring flow regimes through reducing water withdrawals and restoring wetlands in the lower South Fork, the unconfined section. Riparian restoration throughout, and then in-stream the placement of log jams, at large-scale log jams in our unconfined alluvial reaches, and I'll talk to how, because we think that they can be effective at creating small-scale temperature refuges, promoting hypereic exchange, and could also increase effective shade by sort of encouraging the channel to interact with areas where the riparian area is forested. I should say that all of these actions are already being implemented to some degree anyway. Thank you. And so part of our report, we reviewed the status of implementation, identified barriers to implementation, and then worked that analysis into developing recommendations for adaptation. The big finding was that there's a lot of consistency between our current and future priorities, but we need to find a way to do what we're doing harder, better, faster, and at a bigger scale. some of the specific recommendations to highlight. We have several pages worth of recommendations, but just a couple to highlight. We talked about, this is perhaps out of the box, but assessing the feasibility of potentially restoring passage at our natural barriers on the South Fork. We do need to increase the pace of floodplain and riparian restoration. We are limited by funding, but more by opportunity for restoration, landowner willingness, and so we need to find new and novel ways to sort of, get over those barriers. We need to, and we have been doing this, but we're more focused these days, but incorporate into our in-stream restoration designs the explicit objectives of forming temperature refuges, so co-locating log jams in areas of cool water input, like cool water tribs or groundwater seep areas, and considering sort of promoting hyperrheic exchange, and as I mentioned, increasing effective shade, so potentially pushing the channel over to where, or encouraging the channel towards areas where it is forested and the effective shade can be increased. We've discussed the need to evaluate the potential for restoring beaver to the upper watershed. We do need to, and we are doing so, refine our evaluation of potential impacts, especially flow regime and sediment. And then we need to explicitly incorporate climate change, not just into project design, but also into all our programs. And we're really starting to push hard on that, from working with our county partners on floodplain management, to in-stream flow, sorts of discussions and such. So just to leave you with some hope to counter the doom and gloom that is common in these sorts of presentations. This is a graph from earlier showing the potential increase in temperature, and simulation of the natural or restored conditions suggests that we could offset some of those climate impacts with the restoration. So that's promising. It underscores the need to, again, do what we're doing, but faster and better. So for the next steps, this assessment focused on the South Fork Nooksack watershed. If we're really incorporating climate change into salmon recovery, we need to be looking across the landscape that our populations experience, not just the lower other watersheds, the lower Nooksack estuary, nearshore, and offshore areas as well. So, and then finally, I just want to conclude, this was a rapid qualitative assessment. We're looking to refine it over time, improving our projections, adapting our actions, incorporating effectiveness monitoring results. And I just want to conclude with acknowledging the co-authors. Steve Klein is the mastermind behind this pilot project and provided leadership on the way, and he's in the audience as well. So thank you.
We do have time for one quick question, if anybody has one.
Yeah, hi, I'm Paul Pickett of Woods Department of Ecology. I just want to see if you can elaborate a little bit, because I think there's an important point that was kind of implicit. You kind of got at it with the next to last slide where, a TMDL is supposed to meet criteria in the river, but it's like average, it's the daily maximum across in an area, it doesn't address near shore refuge or lateral differences. And it seems like a lot of the implementation is geared towards thermal refugia. So kind of recognizing that, because I remember that an early version of this report I saw was saying basically the system's going to be lethal to salmon if you just look at the daily maximum temperature from the whole water system. So am I right on that? I mean, it seems like a lot of the implementation is geared towards, we can't do better. If we did all this stuff, you might keep it at 20. Right? We're not actually going to get it down to what's really a good temperature, 16 or 18 or something like that. So thermal refugia are going to be a key strategy for resilience. Am I
That's right.
putting that
Yeah.
implicit?
Yeah. I mean, we want to get these. We're looking to potentially, again, with this feasibility, but improve passage to the upper river habitats. we do need to get these fish upstream to that. So temperature refuge is a big objective of our work.
Thank you.